A&M, and then a few years later, you became the CEO and majority owner. So first, what led you to Nutrabolt, and how did you ascend to the CEO role so quickly?
Yeah, so Nutrabolt was not in my long-term plan. I went to Texas A&M and studied accounting and the PPA program, and I interned with Deloitte and Touche, and ultimately signed a letter to go work for Deloitte. But as I still had my master's curriculum to complete, I was working. I was a student worker, and I was approached by my really good friend at the time to come check out this supplement company that he had found. And him and I had worked in a lot of sales jobs together over the course of our high school and early college. And so I went and checked it out, and we were selling sports nutrition products. I didn't have a lot of experience with that, but it was a really small outfit. You guys in a room making phone calls to retailers across the state of Texas. And I actually interviewed for a sales job. And I remember sitting down with the CEO, and first meeting didn't go so well because he asked me where I saw myself, in 5 years. And the right answer, of course, was that I would be right there at Nutrabolt, Cunningham, conquer the world. But I had a different aspiration. I wanted to be in transactional work. I wanted to be whether it be like working for a hedge fund or working M&A for private equity. I wanted to be in New York, and that was my vision at the time. So he told me to get lost, but he called me back 3 or 4 weeks later, and he said, "Okay, like we need some help. We have a lot of questions about our accounting and just trying to get some things straightened out. Like, would you come in and provide some support?" And so I came in, and they were a wreck, as he said, and I got a chance to get into the books and help them sort through some of their various models and their QuickBooks, and one thing led to another. And he's like, "Look, I'd love to have you come work part-time, even if you're not going to be here long term." So I accepted, of course. At the time, I was making sandwiches at a local restaurant in Bryan, College Station, and I couldn't think of a better opportunity to kind of get out of the sandwich shop. So I started coming in, and within the first 4 weeks, what was supposed to be a 20-hour part-time gig turned into full-time. I got a lot of grace from my professors at A&M because I was working full-time, and it was challenging in that we had a lot of big projects, bank meetings that I was preparing the company for, and my professors gave me some opportunity. I took a lot of tests early. I took some tests late, but they worked with me and allowed me to really, flex that muscle and learn, because it was really a great learning opportunity. But during that first year, where I was, all in, still completing my grad work as well as, working full time, I became really close with the founder and first CEO of the company. And in our regular, 80, 90-hour work weeks, as they became, especially during the summer when school was letting out a little bit more, we just became really close. And so he was my first mentor. He gave me a lot of opportunity. And this was a small bootstrap type, operation. So what it did is allowed me to take a lot more oversight than what would have ever been afforded to me at, say, Deloitte or any other company I could have gone to work for. So we kind of joined hands and became partners. Eventually, he'd leave the organization due to personal issues, and I stepped in to be interim CEO. And then when he came back, it became permanent because he wasn't able to make that journey back to the company just due to some of the things that were continuing to go on in his life. So I got an opportunity to become the CEO full time. I got an opportunity to join the partnership, and the rest was history.
That's Great. And one of the things that I thought was really cool while I was there is, we were coming up with a different name and you wanted to make sure to honor him and keep his name in the current name. And so Bolt was his last name, and that's why you kept that there. So
That's
I
right.
always thought that was awesome.
That's right. His last name was Paul. His first name was Paul. His last name was Bodholt, and so we changed the name from Woodbolt to Nutrabolt.
Yeah, a lot of people thought we sold hardware supplies for a while.
That's right. It was not the most intuitive name, but we changed it, and I think it became a little bit more intuitive. And Bolt was significant because it represented his last name, but it also represented kind of a quick, powerful strike, and then Nutra being a word that a root word that definitely I think signified the nutrition space and nutraceutical. Um, yeah, we reframed that.
I did forget to mention to the audience, as you start having questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll be happy to ask them for Doss. Okay, so when did Nutribullet really break out and what led to that growth?
Yeah, our breakout year was really the 2011 timeframe, and so I'll try and be succinct here because I can go on a long tangent about this one. But we had grown kind of brick by brick from 2002 to 2009. We were really servicing mom and pop retail shops across the country, just growing organically. We stayed clear of a lot of the larger corporate flags like the GNCs and the vitamin shops, and certainly didn't work with any of the bigger names like the Walmarts. Just growing brick by brick. In 2009, we started to really look for banners that we could grow underneath, GNC being the biggest one. So we did a lot of test marketing with our brand to see if it would stick. And in 2010, we had success with 5 distinct test markets that we ran, and that success led us to getting a national rollout opportunity. At the same time, we were starting to emerge online. We were starting to get a lot of feedback on our brand. We'd always positioned to be very premium and have a real focus around efficacy that we felt would differentiate us from the competitive set. And so we were priced probably about 20% above most of the categories in which we were competing in, and that we overpriced ourselves in the market. We didn't think that way, but the market was the market, and the market was giving us its perspective, and so we had to listen. And so at that point, we launched a product called C4 that, relative to the rest of our assortment, was about half the price. Our average price point at the time was around $60, and so C4 came to the market at $25, and it was still very premium in its packaging, great disruptive ingredients and formulation. And so that was the product that kind of helped us shed that overpriced perception, and that really, I think, brought a lot of new first time consumers into our brand. And so within a short period of time, we became the number one performance energy / pre-workout supplement in the country. And that just led to all these other doors starting to open up. And that's how we eventually kind of moved into the broader, more mainstream market that is comprised of retailers like Walmart and Target and so on and so forth.
That's great. So many early innovators and disruptors failed to evolve. They kind of rest on what made them successful. And unfortunately for them, the competitors are always looking to leapfrog over them and disrupt the market. So, what is your key to innovating in this competitive environment?
Yeah, so I always like to think about innovation as really a triangulation, within our business of 3 things. Number one, we really obsess over consumer insights. The more, and Magali, since you've been there, I think we've gained a lot more capability in this regard. But we look at consumer insights. We really need to understand, the customer segmentation. What are those attitudes and usage needs? What problems are consumers trying to solve for? that really helps us kind of determine where white space may be within a category, what's not being covered. We also look at the category insights. We try to understand like where are the categories going, what's the competitive set, where are we seeing trends that we need to be aware of as we bring our innovation to market. And then the third one is really our gut and our instinct. We are not purely a what happened yesterday and what shows up in the data. Our very next move. It's a combination of kind of the art and the science being the data, the art being where do you think you need to lead a category to go? Where are consumers not yet voting because they don't have that in their mind's eye. And so being category leaders, we have roughly 40 to 50% market share within the pre-workout energy category, depending on which market. US, it's about 40% share. In the hydration recovery space, we have about 35% market share. And so when you're leading categories like we are, and the next closest competitors are down in the high single digits, so they're not even near us. It's actually our responsibility to move the category forward. And so that's where we really have to rely on our instincts and make sure that we are trying to do things that are kind of on macro trend. So like today, it's convenience, it's better for you, it's truth in labeling, transparency. Those things are macro trends, and then it's knowing your consumer and their needs so well that when you create something, you know that they'll be happy with it. And then we bring the consumers back in to test and validate to make sure that what gets to market is ultimately going to be successful at scale.
That's wonderful. I know that you guys are always working on innovation and looking forward. And so it's great to kind of hear your perspective on how you continue to innovate throughout the, the competitive market that you're in, because it is extremely competitive. Um, so what has been the biggest challenges you've faced as a CEO?
Well, there's been internal, there's been external. When I think about the most recent time frame, there's been a lot of external challenges. I think whether you're in academia or you're in corporate America, this world of the last 6 to 9 months has been very different, right? So we've had to learn how to adapt to some of those challenges, but kind of like thinking big picture. Internally, the business, in its 18th year, we've had at different times to evolve, our capabilities. We started off as an organization with a bunch of young people trying to do something really great. We didn't have all the skill sets to carry the business to where it's at today, and so there's been these inflection points, over the years where the talent that we had in our organization, we couldn't develop fast enough, so we had to bring in, additional talent. In some cases, people would accept, all right, we have to bring in a more seasoned executive in this respective area. This is an opportunity to learn and grow. And sometimes, it was a ceiling for that person who was there in the leadership role before, and they didn't necessarily fit long term moving forward, so we had to make those types of changes. And so we've had a few of those inflection points along the way. We brought in private equity into our company in 2014. That was a point in which we wanted to kind of do everything we could to resist becoming institutionalized and becoming corporate. At the same time, there was a lot of respect that I probably gained more respect for this, in the recent years than I did in 2014, for having structure and process and being able to, really kind of set yourself up to be scalable and deal with incredible complexities that would come from being a global organization. But managing the talent gaps, over these different points of growth has been a challenging thing because I generally want everyone to be along for the ride as long as I am, and that hasn't always been something that we've been able to do. externally, the biggest challenge within our industry has been a little bit of the disruption within the retail landscape, specifically the specialty channel where the GNCs and the vitamin shops live. They've been disrupted heavily by the emergence of Amazon, Amazon becoming a big player in the space. Also, some of the categories building um, their their size and relevancy within the broader mass market channels, such as Walmart, Target, grocery, club. And so as the retail landscape has shifted, it's made us have to adapt our business model and learn new skills. We've been on a digital transformation over the last 2 years or so that I think we've been a little bit late to the game, but we've caught up pretty quickly. So just a lot of change, in a high growth company, there's change. Some of it's from the outside, some of it's from the inside. And it's just about keeping everyone, continuing to focus on that North Star objective. That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah. So in the last 16 years you spent at Nutribullet, you've talked about a lot of the things that have kind of changed and evolved during that time, but what about what's remained the same?
Yeah. So, the ambition, when I kind of look at the collective ambition of the company, right? I kind of won't pinpoint this to individual people, but just the spirit of the company. We've remained, very ambitious. I truly believe that, we have really always had this attitude that like, better is never enough, and we're going to continue to set the bar high and then jump over and then set the bar higher, in that next, period. Being fiercely competitive, we like to win, but win with integrity. And in our categories there, you alluded to earlier, there's hundreds, if not, well over 1,000 brands that are out there competing for the shelf space, competing for the online real estate, trying to win share of mind with the consumer, and to go to battle every single day and try and grow household penetration and grow customer lifetime value, and continue to be known as the brand that does it the best. Try to be the Apple of our industry. It requires that competitive spirit. But besides just being competitive and being full of ambition, the company, I think, has always, been one that's kind of team oriented. We win and we lose together. It's extremely collaborative. We've had our moments. We've been not so collaborative at times. We've been dysfunctional. So I'm not going to say that we've been, perfect, because we haven't. But when I zoom out and look at things over 3, 4, 5 year periods, it's always been a team game, and that hasn't changed.
Yeah, the motto is work hard,
Really,
play hard.
huh?
I said the motto was always work hard, play hard.
Yeah, work hard, play hard, and then I think and especially in today's time frame, like what defines success is resiliency. Being able to be adaptive to change, being able to continue to push through, and having thick skin as an organization. That's been something we've always had.
That's great. So I have one last question before I jump into all of our other questions. But looking back, given the chance, would you do anything differently?
No, I think there's a lot of like things that could have mistakes that could have been avoided, but even when I think about some of the challenges that we were probably going through when you were at Nutribullet, what I've learned today and what's made for I think the best Nutribullet in 2020 was having to go through those various crucibles. I mean, just having that you know that real adversity, and finding our path forward, and being broken to be built back stronger. I wouldn't change a single thing.
That's great. All right, so I'm going to jump into one of our first questions that was asked in the chat. It says, you studied accounting and finance as a part of the A&M PPA program. How did that prepare you for your career at Nutribullet?
So I've always really enjoyed that I can read financial statements. I can diagnose, kind of what's going on in the business through really the language of business, which is accounting. Um, I think it's important as a business leader, whether you're a CEO or you're running a department, or maybe you're even running a team within a department, to have a good financial acumen, to know how to measure results, how they ladder back up to the financial results of the company. I think that's extremely important, and it brings better accountability, um, to what the organization is trying to do, financially, strategically. So I think it helped me understand the language of business, and that's something that I very much cherish.
Great. So, what advice would you give to our students, staff, faculty who aspire to follow in your footsteps and emulate your success?
Well, I don't, you know, I don't believe that entrepreneurship is for everyone. I think for those people who really have a dream, a passion, and can in a lot of ways kind of dismiss the people who may be trying to tell you you can't do it, but you have to be able to kind of put on the blinders and really zero in and focus on what you believe, because a lot of people will be detractors and tell you that what you're doing is silly, or it's never going to work. And I had those in my life. I certainly had the the wise adults around me, telling me like I should just go to Deloitte. It's a really prestigious opportunity, and it was an incredible opportunity. But I would have not been following my dreams, and I haven't regretted that for one day. So being stubborn, I think, is important. Second, I think it's really important, and I've always done, is really kind of have kind of a pie in the sky long term vision for what you want to do. And it doesn't matter how crazy the dream might be, but you put it out there, and then you kind of work backwards. And so, I mean, if you want to, lasso the moon in 10 years, like, what do you need to do over the next 12 months? And then work that backwards. What do you need to do over the next 3 months? So you create a glide path to, what you want to ultimately achieve. And that way you can check in, you can hold yourself accountable. Am I on the right path? Am I not on the right path? And so a lot of work that I spend time doing is really around our strategic framework, that's really foundationally built around goals. And so we run a framework called OGSM, which is Objective, Goal, Strategy, Measure. And so at the highest level, what we want to achieve over the next 3 years, that's the goal. That's the objective. The goal is exactly like, what is that quantitatively? So those numbers are words, numbers, and then strategy back to words again. What are the strategies that help us deliver that objective? And then measure. What's a measure of those strategies? And we put milestones in, and that's how we hold ourselves accountable to that glide path. So being structural in the way you think about your ambition, I think, is really important.
No, that's great. And we've talked about all of your successes, but obviously, with successes, there comes some little hiccups. So, which mistake have you learned the most from?
Oh boy, um, what mistake? Um, Early on, I think I think I probably didn't appreciate much how much a CEO needs, a right hand, needs, or a few right hands, having that really, really strong, executive team. I've learned over the last, 7, 8 years how important that team is. But trying to take on too much, wanting to be overly in control of certain outcomes. Today I have such an incredible team. I'm able to trust that the things that I have experts and specialization on my team, I can trust that they can handle those responsibilities, and it allows me to do what I'm best at. But early on, it was very difficult, to kind of let the reins out, and I think that was a maturity to being the CEO and being able to trust in others completely, and also probably a product of bringing in great talent. Over the years, we continue to upgrade.
Oh, that's awesome. So as being CEO, how do you facilitate and encourage innovation at all levels of the company? Do you train employees to be innovative, or do you look for people who have something special in them?
So, and I'll say we've been, better at this at certain times. Not always great at it, but you really want a culture of innovation. And what that means is that, one, it's not something that's functional. I mean, we do have a R&D department. We do have, packaging design. We have all these people who do innovation work, but innovation isn't really just to a product category. It could be an innovation of a business model, innovation of a business process, or innovation of how you run the organization from a management or performance management perspective. And so trying to challenge thought leadership and ideas, to really challenging everyone to be a participant. So you break down those boundaries. I think Jack Welch, coined it as a boundaryless environment where innovation can come from, the quote unquote mailroom, or it can come, from, an area that you would never suspect. But you want a team where people can put forth their ideas, and have a system that can capture those ideas and get them visibility with, some of the decision makers within the company. You want, I think, to try and naturally create collaboration opportunities. So I think we were really intentional in the physical office space of trying to create these like collisions within the office where people could have whiteboard space on the wall and they could join different departments. They could come together and do that. Today in a remote working environment, it's something that we're still trying to figure out. But it's got to be cultural, and it's got to be boundaryless. I think to really make innovation work in a company.
We did love those walls, and it was always fun to see everybody's kiddos come and draw on the walls too. So the kiddos were getting nurtured and becoming innovative at a young age as well.
That's right. That's right.
So how do you think that A&M can produce more innovators like yourself over time?
I think creating opportunities probably for people outside the business school to work with people inside the business school. There's a lot of really smart people inside the business school, but there's also, I think, a more holistic address of problems that need to be solved when you bring engineers, computer science, and you bring, the other elements, of the university together. So finding ways to kind of bring these collisions, these different groups together within the business school. I think, continuing to help people understand how to get out of the blocks. Starting a company is, they don't really teach you that. And maybe there's courses today, but there's a lot of things, whether it's raising your first money, or it's organizing, or it's, how to think about, building a business plan that can be, externally facing. These are things that I never learned, in my time at school. And I think a lot of institutions probably don't spend a lot of time in those areas unless it's a specific program. So, I think those are areas that are really important today.
So one of our students asked, as you studied finance, what helped in creating a portfolio/resume to gain and show your experience in that area?
Um, well, to be clear, I didn't really have any experience. You know, I did the PPA program in which I was given the opportunity to intern with Deloitte and Touche, and that was like a spring internship. So my job experience, besides making sandwiches, at the time was, you know, going into that internship was really um, just my academic, you know, experience, you know, in my undergrad thus far. When I got to Deloitte, you know, that was great experience and taught me a lot and it helped me make more sense of what I was learning in the classroom. And you know, then after my internships, when I started to work at Nutrabolt, um, but I never really put my resume back out there. You know, I was kind of hooked in, and you know, the rest was just kind of a learn on the job. But I think, you know, I think internships are really important, and you know, I would encourage anyone, you know, to look for those companies that you feel like you can really learn new skills, and skills that are going to be, you know, important skills, that are either like primary to what you want to do or maybe adjacent to something that you're going to be doing, that gives you a little bit more flexibility to move around a little bit. I think one of the things, you know, if you're starting early in a career, you know, is to ask for like crossover assignments. You know, I think crossover assignments are really valuable. You know, getting on teams where you're doing something that is not part of like maybe the core job responsibility. But the more reps you can get, you know, and if you've learned something from anything that you've been put into, you know, though it may not be the most glamorous, you know, job, like that's relevant. People want to know how you think. People want to know like how you have learned, you know, from different experiences. And it's less about I think the prestige, the name on the door, and more about like being able to communicate those learnings as like case studies in your life. So I know I kind of walked around that question, but I'm kind of unique in that I haven't had a lot of my resume is like one line as far as where I've worked, and you know, 50 pages deep on what happened there.
Well, that's exciting. Then if you ever need any help with a resume, you can always come back to A&M and I'm sure somebody will look at your resume.
Wow. Thanks, Miguel.
So as a business leader, you often face high stakes situations that involved a lot of pressure. What are some strategies you use to cope with that stress?
Um, so one of the things that I've really practiced over the last several years, and you know, which I've done more so, you know, earlier on, is, you know, really creating time for myself. And so I think that, you know, for someone to be on top of their professional career, they have to focus a little bit inward on themselves. And I mean that in the, you know, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual states. And so for me, like working out, getting, um, you know, getting a place to kind of increase my endorphins and really have that exertion, and get into a physically strong place, has, I think, helped me tremendously. The flip side of that is having quiet time. And so I have always made a habit of trying to get away from everything for at least maybe 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day. So I have 4 kids. It's crazy. You know, everywhere I go, there's something going on, something chaotic. And so I used to seek out, just go out to lunch by myself, kind of sit back in a corner, and I'd put the screens away, and I would just kind of sit there and have my lunch and have some quiet time. And that like really helped me, you know, kind of reorganize my brain. And then one of the things I really rely on is I am constantly maintaining my to-do list and my goals. So the things I lay out, you know, I'm putting out goals. I have my plans. I have my task, my checklist items. I'm constantly trying to make sure that I'm moving through those things in the right priority sequence. So constantly resequencing and reprioritizing, and then moving through those things. So that allows me to stay on top of what's most important. Allows me to kind of unclutter my mind, and allows me to kind of stay physically able to deal with stress. So I recommend all of that.
That's great. So, do you find it more challenging now with a larger company culture to drive innovation versus when Nutribullet was younger?
I think it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, we have way more resources to approach innovation. On the other, we are a lot more thoughtful, and the stakes are much higher. And so, there are more parties involved. Um, just going through, one of the things I spoke about, like the consumer insights and the category insights, that research and that discipline up front. I think we have a much higher likelihood of getting something right today because we are invested in that process. But we are also probably bringing fewer things to market, in a given period of time. So the big company, in a lot of ways facilitates, but in some ways, it also, I think, um, reduces the amount. But I think the one learning is just because you can't maybe do as much, in a certain period of time, it's not necessarily a bad thing. What we've really focusing on is high incrementality and going deeper with innovation. So if we're going to do something, we're going to put the whole organization behind it, and we're going to do it really well versus doing 10 things that might move the needle a little bit. And that's been a pretty big cultural shift, even in the last 12 months, going down a different path.
That was actually a two-part question. So, the second part of that question was, do you find it more challenging to inspire seasoned and experienced talent versus young, less experienced talent to be more ambitious by dreaming big and pursuing the opportunities at hand?
I don't know if it's a matter of seasoning. I think it's a matter of mindset. So, I have people in my executive team that have, you know, 25 years of experience, and, we have people, in parts of our organization that may only have 5 years of experience. And I think you can have someone that may have 3 or 4 decades of experience, but still are super competitive and want to win, and are kind of that obsessive over achievement type mindset. And you can have the person who's been in business for 3 decades, and they're tired, and they've lost their kind of will to make big impacts. They're just kind of going with the flow. So I don't think it's so much how long they've been in. I think you probably do see people earlier in their careers being a little bit more pie in the sky, maybe a little less grounded. But I think that entrepreneurial mindset is not something that's kind of time dependent.
Great. So, we have time for two more questions. So, the first one being, as a leading company in your field, how do you raise the bar or look to keep progressing when you're already at the top?
So we are arguably at the top of our current addressable market, but to me, it's just got to dream into a bigger addressable market. So, for example, we've been leaders within sports nutrition for over a decade, but we built a brand in C4 that can cross over. Its brand equity can cross over into the energy drink category, and the TAM, or the total addressable market, from sports nutrition to the U.S. energy drink market, goes from 5 billion to almost 20 billion. Globally, it goes from 10 billion to 65 billion. So, crossing over, we built hydration recovery products within the sports nutrition landscape, but finding ways to bring that brand equity and that efficacy and that better for you story into, say, sports drinks, which has a much larger addressable market, and had, historically, it's been a Gatorade kind of, single brand owned category, but you've seen some disruption with Body Armor and the likes more recently. So it's thinking about how to move from maybe a really kind of narrowly defined sports nutrition market to maybe a broader active nutrition market, and then thinking about the company maybe even more broadly as a health and wellness company. And you know, when you start getting out to the health and wellness, macro, you're now in the multi-trillion-dollar market. So it's just about redreaming and reimagining, what it is that you're trying to do. And one of the things that I think is in NutriBult's future is a pretty robust acquisition strategy that will allow us to kind of redefine us, not as a sports nutrition platform, but as a health and wellness platform.
That's great. Um, Obviously, being on the team, we worked on a lot of fun projects. So there's gummies, there's still ready drinks, there's carbonated, there's powders, there's pre-workout, protein, the list goes on. Um, and I know that this is probably a little secretive, but if you can, what are the most exciting and interesting projects you're working on now?
Yeah, so I'll speak to it like in generalities here. One of the biggest things that we're seeing right now with consumers that are, on this, journey to improve their health and their overall wellness, um, is a uh, is a high desire to understand themselves, and to have solutions that are personalized and really meant for their unique needs. So one of the things I'm really excited about is developing our personalization platform that I think can work within sports nutrition. I think it can work within active nutrition. That's what I think will ultimately be our pathway into um, the VMHS set, which is really the vitamins, and minerals and herbal supplements. But in a future state, us having the ability to understand a consumer's deficiency, that maybe it's a vitamin D deficiency, or it's a they you know chronic uh, showing up chronically low in certain electrolytes like magnesium, and us being able to then personalize a Vitapack or something that they can take with them, that we can send them, they can take every day. Then they can reassess their levels. So there's companies out there like Everlywell that are doing, testing kits at home, and so partnerships with like an Everlywell or a brand XYZ that can provide that technical capability, or building that technical capability to then really kind of arm all the nutritional options that we can serve. I think that's that's like a 10-year idea, but that's something that we're going to be working on.
That's great. We had one last question come in and we still have a little bit of time. So they want to know about your roadblocks. What is a roadblock that you experience and how did you overcome it?
Um, One of the roadblocks has been not properly assessing, you know, well, not properly assessing what the challenges in the business were, and for a while, I think convincing yourself that the business is doing fine, and everything's working as it's intended, and it's just it's a people issue, or it's just a we need to work harder type issue. This last 2 years, the business has gone through incredible transformation, from everything going really, really well to all of a sudden we were struggling to put one foot in front of the other, to back to where we're hitting on all cylinders again. And so, like, diagnosing that last 2 years, like what the heck went wrong, and where did I miss it? How could I have seen this earlier? Um, I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably do this, but when you're having a lot of success, it's real easy to be blinded by it and to miss things that are right there in front of you. And so we, as a business, we went from 200 SKUs to total like individual items, right? Like 200 items to 900 in a matter of 2 years. We did that with an ERP system that was faulty at best, and really not configured for the complexities that we were now throwing at the business. So we had data issues, we had system process issues, we had, because of that, we had a lot of manual work to do. but there was no way to coordinate that level of manual work in the environment that we had as quickly as we needed to. And so we needed to say no, a lot more than we said yes. And we were just continuing to bring new products to market and adding these complexities into the business. And a lot of that happened through our international growth because we've had to have very different product assortments, for all the countries to meet the regulatory requirements. And we just became too overconfident, and it bit us. So I think being blind to your vulnerabilities has been a huge roadblock that we've gotten past. And we've definitely put some things in place, I think, now to do a little bit more of a stress test, and to ask the right questions. Like, are we taking on too much? Are we focused in the right areas? Do we have the capability first to serve the ambition? So maybe not exactly answering your question, but hopefully serving up what has been my biggest challenge, over the last 2 years.
No, I mean, I think that's perfect. I think that when things are going great, that's when it's hard to innovate. That's when it's hard to see the things that are not going, because you're finally breathing and exciting that you're not struggling, you're going over that path. So I think that your story will really resonate with everybody, and it's definitely a great um, kind of tidbit to keep in your pocket. So as our students and faculty and staff continue with their success, that's something that they're always paying attention to. So, well, thank you, Doss. I know that you're super busy, so I want to keep us on time. We are very happy to have you as part of our program, as our start off to our program, and wish you continued success.
Well, Magali, thank you for having me on today. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys, and it's always great to be back in front of Texas A&M, and definitely miss Bryan College Station. But yeah, thank you very much. Hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving, and look forward to doing this again sometime.
Bye.
All right, bye, guys.